On episode 294 of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet Kraig Brockschmidt and discuss his book, Solving Stress. You can find the full show notes for this episode at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/294. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. Hello, and thank you for being a part of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast. I'm really glad to have you here during this holiday week. I'm going to be spending some time with family, attending a bowl game, and actually consolidating homes, which is good and bad, but kind of exciting and a kind of a good time of the year for me to get ready for the new year. And if you're thinking about really ratcheting up your health and fitness journey during this upcoming season, the new year, the New Year's resolution, all of that, I'd strongly encourage you to check out 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/train, where you can hire me as your online personal trainer. And I'm trying out something a little bit different this year. I'm actually going to offer somewhat of a lower cost option for folks to actually have some time with me as a part of a group training program. So I do encourage you to go check it out. Go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/train, and you can learn a lot about what I'm doing there. And if you have any questions, again, always just email me. I'm pretty well available. But now I want to talk about Kraig. Kraig Brockschmidt is a computer engineer by training, but kind of on the side, he's really focused on yoga and meditation and things like that. And so he's kind of found that balance of how you can manage stress in a very stressful workplace and a very stressful life. And he's put it together in his book called Solving Stress. So Kraig and I have an outstanding conversation about stress. I really encourage you to listen to this episode because Kraig and I really get deep, and I share a lot of the things that have been bothering me over the course of the last couple of years, particularly the last few months. And Kraig and I kind of talk about how his method will be something that will definitely help me going forward in the future. So it's a book that I'm very proud to have read, and very proud to have this conversation with Kraig, and very proud to share it with you. So Kraig, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Great to be here.
You know, your book, Solving Stress, and I've talked about this a few times on the podcast because I actually went on Amazon, did a search for stress and stress reduction, and then I got the notes on every book that was being published for like the next 90 days on stress.
We're busy.
and I reached out to every one of those authors, realizing I might end up getting them all to come back and say yes. And if they all come back and say yes, I'm going to be talking about stress for the next 4 months. But I was kind of okay with that because stress is such a huge, huge deal in the lives of most of us, if not all of us.
And it's been a huge deal for decades. It's something that I think is a consistent, persistent experience for most people. And I think, the fundamental reason for that, which is something I bring up in the book, is that stress comes whenever there's a separation between what you want and expect from the world and the way the world actually is. And if you look at it, most people always want something different than reality. They want to morph their experiences and the situations around them to favor them more frequently, or to be more along the tunes of their likes or away from their dislikes. And so it's very natural that people end up experiencing stress.
Yeah. And, it has become so common. I mean, people know about it so much that, people will write books, or they'll put tips on a website, or tips, like you said, on an orange juice carton. This is how you resolve or fix or eliminate stress. And, those tips, well, they sound good. They sound right. They sound like, oh, yeah, of course, you should do that and you should do that. And those are actually just kind of typically parts of just a healthy lifestyle. But there's a problem with those tips.
Yes, normally there's not consistency in terms of really knowing what works the best and really going to the heart of where stress comes from, like I just said, about that separation between your expectations and reality, and learning how to relax back toward that reality. And so there's a lot of things that help you manage stress or deal with potential stressors in some way or another when things come up. And you can go on forever making laundry lists of those. I mentioned in the book how I picked up a book on stress management in my own research, and it was 300 pages long, and every page had at least 3 different suggestions on it. And as I went through the book, I was noticing how a lot of them contradicted one another. That it would say things like, relax about the details and don't sweat the small stuff, but then, be focused on the details, or, keep track of all the little intricacies, and which will work for some people at different times, right? Yeah. That some people need to be a little more disciplined about those things. Other people need to be less disciplined about them. And so as I just look in the book here on those pages 44 and 45, here's some examples. It says, question every paper that crosses your desk, but don't sweat the small stuff. Make your car as comfortable as possible, but use ride sharing or public transit. Get a jump on, immerse in, or stay abreast or leapfrog change, but go cold turkey on it. And it was just on and on with that kind of material. And I looked at the book and said, you know what? If I was immersed in stress in my life, this book would stress me out even more.
Yeah.
Because it's not actually offering me the clear guide to what works the best and the quickest and the most efficiently for addressing the root cause of stress. And that's why the book I have here is called Solving Stress and not Managing Stress. There's a big difference between those two verbs, because solving means you fix it and get out of it, as opposed to just moving it around.
Right. And I think I really like the way you kind of put all of those tips into kind of like 4 categories. You had the great stress exchange, venting, discipline, and escape. Mm-hmm. And so I like the way you kind of put those. Is if we start thinking about what is this, is this actually doing something to help me both now and in the future, or is this something that's just kind of solving it or making me feel like I'm being proactive in solving it? And so when you talk about the great stress exchange, one of the examples you gave was that someone will go and they'll just do extreme workouts. Mm-hmm. And so that's a stressor on the body.
That's right.
For a fitness trainer, I would call that a good stress. But the reality of it is if you're already kind of overstressed, overstimulated, that's not necessarily a good thing to exchange a different kind of stress for what you're going through.
Yeah, so the point I really make about that, and the great stress exchange, as I call it with capital letters, was, I think, one of the fun discoveries in writing this book, is realizing that all of those different stress management techniques that people offer are, they offer some immediate relief, but not a long-term relief, because what they're doing is they're fighting stress with a different kind of stress. And why it works to some extent is that every person in their bodies and their emotions and their intellect, however they relate to their own reality, has more strengths in one area than another. Some people are much better able to handle physical stress than they are emotional stress. And I consider my father to be an example of this. I mentioned in the book a certain person that I knew, and this is my dad, who used to buy old television sets at thrift shops, and he was a career engineer at Boeing, and he would take them out in the back and he'd just beat on them with sledgehammers. And he was taking out his emotional stress from his workplace and putting into his physical body. And as I say in the book, this is way better. It's way better to beat on a TV than to beat on your boss or to beat on a coworker. One of them's going to put you in jail and the other one's just going to put you out a few dollars. So a big difference in there. And that exchange of emotional stress for physical stress can buy you the time in which you can then start to work through those emotional issues and find a different response. In the same way then, so venting, I like, is that way of exchanging emotional or some other kind of stress for physical stress. So yes, exercise, competitive sports. There used to be a thing years ago where people would have workshops and you're throwing mud at the wall and trying to scream about all your problems at the same time. And, it generates a different kind of stress because you're still dealing with the anger. Discipline, on the other hand, is one of those categories where you have all the special diets and time management and managing your money, anything that requires fine detailed control over different things in your life. And that actually exchanges the stress of kind of feeling overwhelmed to a stress on your willpower and your ability to handle details. Now, I used to use this kind of management a lot because I'm good at handling details. And so yes, when even today when I'm dealing with a lot of different details and issues in my day-to-day work, I'll manage that by organizing. Now, I don't say that I will get stressed about it because I think I've solved my stress for the most part using the techniques in this book, but I still go back to that organizing, that discipline that works for me. And then you have escape, which is really just getting any form of distraction that takes you away from the awareness of the stress and puts your awareness onto something else. And that's why we call certain vacations getaways, right? We have to get away from something, but as wise men have said over the centuries, you can never get away from yourself.
Yes, yeah, and I want to correct myself. There are actually 3 buckets under the Great Stress Exchange, and I actually do a little bit of all 3 of those. Mm-hmm. Quite frankly, for me the venting, and I've even said this sometimes on the podcast, is I would go into the gym and just load weights on the bar, and just use that anger and just boom as hard as I could go lifting those weights. Unfortunately, when I injured myself, I lost that outlet. Okay. And so I started to lean on the other 2 a little bit more. So suddenly I found myself in meetings when I was getting stressed in a meeting, I'm sitting there just doing to-do notes, kind of building myself a list of all the things I want to do so that I'm not so much escaping, so much as just saying, now I have a discipline for what I'm going to do today. I'm going to focus on this list, and that's all I'm going to think about. So I don't think about those things that have been stressing me. Even though most of the things on that to-do list were not going to help me deal with that stress, it was just distraction enough for me to feel like I was in control of my day, where I hadn't felt like I was in control before. And then on the final one, escape, I have been binging on Netflix and having a couple glasses of wine, those types of things. In fact, I used to do audiobooks. I was doing audiobooks and I was doing all these nonfiction audiobooks. But for the last 3 months, because of just what's going on with work, and I'll get into that a little bit later, quite frankly, I started using fiction books because I was like, even these nonfiction books are kind of making me feel stressed. Because I want to apply
because
the
they're
things I'm learning.
they're giving you so much more information and things to think about that if you're already feeling somewhat overwhelmed by exactly that, it won't really be relaxing to add more.
Yeah, so I started listening to Clancy and some science fiction and things that were not going to affect my life because it wasn't giving me a to-do list. I don't have to go hit anybody today because that's not my job. So I understand that everyone would think that that's value, but it's very short-lived and it's not really getting you where you want to be.
Like I really said in the book, that the value is that it does buy you time. And it gives you some distance from those immediate stressors that if you react to them badly, which we so often do anyway, then you start invoking all the stress response in your body that's very physically damaging. That's what the whole first chapter of the book is trying to paint, that picture of how damaging this chronic stress really becomes. So buying some time is helpful, but it doesn't really help in the long term, because what all of those strategies ultimately do is make you less aware of the actual problem that you're facing instead of more aware of it and helping you raise your energy so you can get above the intensity of the stress and the intensity of the stressor. Because that's really the big trick, is how do you get your energy and raise your energy to the point where the stressor doesn't seem so big anymore. Because if you think about most of the stressors you've encountered in your life, you'll find that if you give it enough time, the stress intensity naturally diminishes from that particular cause to a point where you feel like you can handle it. Of course, we get so many stressors piled one on top of the other that, how do we ever get above those things? But that's really what so many of the exercises in the book are trying to show, is how to raise that energy, how to get the stress out of your body that's already there, give yourself greater awareness of what's happening so that in the moment that those potential stressors come, you can start to make a new choice. And really, even more to the point is that I think the biggest key insight in this entire book is that with any potential stressor that comes to you, you're going to react. reaction to a stressor is a given. A lot of stress management approaches in the past have tried to say, well, control your reactions by not reacting. But I found that not reacting just isn't an option. You will react in some way, but you can change the nature of that reaction, specifically away from the tension and the anger and all of the things that lead to the stress response in the body, where you get that adrenaline surge and that hormonal dump and the cortisol and all the stuff that damages your body so much. You can retrain yourself to, in that moment, react with relaxation instead of tension, to react with self-control rather than the desire to control the outside world, to react with calmness rather than agitation. And you can see where I'm going with that is just to train yourself to react with the positive qualities that are the counter opposites of stress, rather than to react with more stress.
Right. And you kind of have 4 steps to kind of walk us through that. I'm going to give you an example from my life. I was on vacation. I took the whole family to Asia. It was an extended vacation, so we went all over. And so we were in Thailand, and we were going to our last stop, which was Australia. And I had forgotten that not long ago, it was a few years ago, Australia had required us to do paperwork online to get our Australian visa, and we had to have done that before we board the plane. It used to be you just walk up and you're awarded a visa on site, but they had changed that with this online tool, and I had forgotten about it. So I arrive at the ticket counter, and they're like, well, have you done your visa? Because we're not seeing you in the system. And I'm like, oh, no.
Oh, no.
And they're like, well, you have to do this. And there were 5 of us. So I had to do 5 times. It wasn't like I could do one thing online. And I had my phone. And so I'm like, okay. And their Wi-Fi wasn't working. So number one, I was having to do this based on local phone service. And I was the numbers were just clicking through my head how much this was going to cost. But the other thing was I'm trying to key in credit card numbers and go field to field on a form on my iPhone, standing there in the airport knowing that if I don't get this done quickly enough, we're going to miss our flight. And I just about had a breakdown at that point. I'm just doing the best I can. I cannot believe they don't have a computer somewhere and I can just sit down and just do this. I don't believe they don't have Wi-Fi. My brain just kept churning about all these things that, and I was trying to get it done, and really almost, like I said, just completely had an anxiety attack breakdown right there.
Which I'll jump in and point out that all of those things you mentioned are projections of your expectations that it shouldn't be like this. It should be some other way. And you get so caught up in that, as opposed to focusing on, well, what do I have to do right now? Without controlling the rest of it, what do I need to focus on? Yeah. And all of those other thoughts just pull you away from that constantly.
Yeah. So if I'd gone through your steps of stop, breathe, reflect, and then choose, that would have been an exercise that, gee, I wish your book were out then. But, but yeah, it is a technique to get in the moment, because I think that's the 2 sides of this, and we're going to talk about the preparation and making yourself, I guess, a little bit more resilient, or at least more aware in a minute. But here we are talking about you're going to get into a moment, and sometimes that moment overwhelms you, and you have to be able to react. You have to be able to address it right there. So can you kind of walk me through what should I have done in that situation?
Yeah, so first of all, the stop, breathe, reflect, choose, those 4 steps is a process actually originated with Dr. Herbert Benson and Eileen Stewart that they developed in something called the Wellness Book. And Herbert Benson is also very well known for a book he wrote called The Relaxation Response that studies the physiological opposite to the stress response that's so well documented. He documented what happens on the opposite side when your body starts to heal itself when you actually get to a place where you're stimulating the relaxation part of your body rather than the stress part of your body. And it's a wonderful read and gets you all kinds of really good medical research from that. But it's the process is really to say, if you're aware of if you've practiced what stress feels like in the moment, and this is what a lot of the exercises in my book are trying to help you do, is become aware of that moment that's happening when it happens, rather than hours later and you think, oh, I wish I'd reacted differently, right? It's that self-awareness to say, this is happening. I see this. I've experienced this before. I want to do something different. To just take a pause. Even in your situation, yes, you were on a time crunch, but if you could have paused for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, and just recognize that you don't have to control everything because you can't, there you have your moment of stopping. Next is breathe, which simply is, on a very metaphysical level, is about taking in and accepting the reality around you. If you think about what you're doing when you're breathing, you're inhaling the environment. You're accepting it. If you do a very full deep breath or even a few deep breaths, you just really are naturally, metaphysically, physically, on all different levels, putting yourself in tune with what's there and what's real. Then you have the ability, you've slowed yourself down, you've caught yourself before you've made that wrong decision to get freaked out. Then you can reflect on, okay, what's the worst that can happen here? So in your situation, you could have thought about it like, well, the worst that happens is, so what if we miss our plane? We can reschedule it. So maybe we have to rearrange a few things in our vacation, but what's important is that we're here together. And it will probably make a really good story someday, won't it?
Yeah, well,
right?
It is a story. It's not necessarily one I'm proud of, but had I handled it properly, yes.
It becomes, that you have that ability then to see that there's different options and there's choices rather than feeling that you're a victim of circumstance. And that's what that little bit of reflection allows you to do. Then you can choose your response. And in your case, you may have chosen to say, okay, I'm not worried about missing the plane, but I'm going to still work on this as focused as I can to get through it and see if we can still make that work. If not, maybe we're supposed to be here another day. I think of this sometimes when I live in Northern California and drive down Interstate 80 between kind of the Lake Tahoe area, which I'm near, and San Francisco and the Bay Area on occasion. And almost every time I drive that way, which is every couple of months, I think, when I make a long trip like that, there's invariably some heinous accident on that freeway. There's some car rolled over in the median or things like this, and you get stuck in some traffic jam, which, of course, could be a stressor, but it's like, well, at least I wasn't in the wreck, right?
Yeah.
And I've thought about the number of situations where, something delayed me or, changed what I thought was supposed to happen. And then I look at what would have happened if I'd been 5 minutes earlier, if I had been pushing, to control the world myself and push my agenda. I might have been in that wreck. I might have been in the wrong place at the wrong time, as opposed to, kind of allowing the rest of the universe around me to cooperate with that sense of relaxation that, it'll protect you in a way. You can think of during that reflect phase, well, what if we miss that plane and it crashes? You would have been very happy not to be on it, right?
Well, it would have been a bittersweet because, there were people on it. But
there would have been other people. But that's the kind of reflection that you can go through. And as with the breathing, you start to connect yourself to that greater reality around you, that the world is so much bigger than you, your ego, your little problems, and what you want to have happen in this moment, that these damn people here at this desk should not be doing this to me, and I wish they were different, and blah, 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 blah. You can get so worked up around that. But if you reflect, you start to even relax more deeply and just accept, hey, everybody's here. They're trying to do their job, and it can work well. I have a good story to share in that. It's not in the book because it didn't come up in context, but I think it does now. That I went to India a few years back. I think this was in 2004, and I was staying there for a month and actually doing work to help a group who was trying to open a store in a shopping mall. And I was actually doing some contracting work on their behalf. And when I flew over, all these people that had already been there ahead of me were asking me to bring, tools and rechargeable batteries for the power drills. And they wanted me to bring like a massage table and a couple laptop computers and all these books. And so I had all this stuff with me, right? And, I'm trying to go through customs. And they have a pretty stiff import fee in India. It's like 40% of the value. And I noticed ahead of me that there were these men from either Korea or Japan or something like that. And the import agents the customs agents had all of their stuff just open on all these tables. And they had like all these car parts and, mechanical devices and stuff. And they were trying to, butter up the customs agent and say, oh, no, we're not importing these, we're doing something. And they were just lying through their teeth about it. And you could tell everybody was just getting into really heated arguments and all that. And in the meantime, I had to put my luggage through some x-rays so they could see what was in it. And the person who was manning the x-ray machine just asked what this one box was, and it was one of those listening stations you put, with like CD samples on it and stuff you put on displays in a store so you can hear tracks from CD selections. And they didn't know what it was, and they said, I told them, I said, well, you probably have to pay a duty on this. Like, okay, sure, fill out the little slip for me. And so when I finally got over to the customs agents, I know that these guys had been just through a real hell with these other folks trying to cheat their way into the country. And I just went very innocently up to them and said, I was told I need to pay a duty on this. How much is it? With no contention, no arguments, and just respecting their reality, respecting mine. And I think I paid $80, and that was it. And I went through with everything else.
Absolutely. So now the step to get from here to there, in the book, you put together a set of daily exercises. Mm-hmm. That take about 20 minutes a day. You could take longer if you want once you get comfortable with it. But I guess basically starting out, it's an investment of about $20 minutes a day. No dollars. That's the cool part. Is all of this is a free thing that you can just do. These are activities that you do personally.
Anywhere, anytime, without any special equipment, without any special trainers or facilities needed. Yes.
Yeah. So do you mind just generally talking us through that process?
Sure. So one of the key things that there's a group of physical exercises which are stretching and what I call tense and relax exercises, and also breathing exercises. And that's followed then by a simple meditation practice which increases awareness. So let me talk about kind of what these different exercises actually accomplish. So one of the key things about retraining your reaction, like I said before, is increasing your awareness of when it's happening and then being able to choose to relax in the moment. But the problem that most people have is that they don't know how to relax. How many times have people said, just relax? But do we know how, right?
Well, typically when someone tells you to relax, you get less relaxed. You get more intense.
You get more tense, but
they're trying to take you away from, like you said, we have one reality and then there's what's actually happening. And when someone's telling you to relax, they're basically telling you they're dismissing your reality. Which
That's right,
puts you off even further.
And they're asking you to dismiss the situation. Right. So now when I talk about relaxing, I'm actually talking about physical relaxation in your body. And this is something we are almost never taught how to do. Right? We're taught how to stretch. We know how to tense. We do that naturally because that's just a physiological response to, any kind of pain, which, heck, the world is full of pain, right? Even from when you're a baby. But we don't really teach ourselves or learn how to relax at will. And that's what a lot of these basic physical exercises are trying to do. So in the movements, there's various, just like arm rotations and shoulder rotations, shoulder stretches and neck rolls, that are all about just releasing some of the chronic tension we have around our neck and our shoulders. And that's where, if you look at many people who are stressed, that's where it's accumulating more than anywhere else in the body. Because if you think about it, the arms are kind of your expression of activity, more so than your legs are mobility, but your arms are activity. And so your desire to control the world around you is often expressed through your arms and your neck and your shoulder muscles. So if you can do some exercises, and I just have 5 simple things in the book, to start relaxing those muscles, you unwind some of the tension that you have in those areas. But now the tense and relax or squeeze and relax exercises are really I would think some of the most important physical exercises I have here, because what you're doing is deliberately tensing muscles in your body, individual muscles as well as your whole body. And there's actually a sequence of 20 different body parts that if you do that sequence, you get really a treatment of the entire body. What you're doing in that is and let me just kind of demonstrate what's called the double breath, which is like that. It's a short and a quick inhalation through the nose sort of short inhalation and a long, and then a short exhalation and a long exhalation through the mouth. And if at the same time you do that, you gradually tense your whole body while you're breathing in, and then tensing your whole body and vibrating, and then throw the tension out with the exhale. What that actually teaches you how to do is to discern the difference between tension and relaxation, because you're doing it consciously and you're doing it under your own volition. And then the 20-part body tense and relax is to do the individual muscles. And it's by practicing that you learn this is tension, this is relaxation. This is tension, this is relaxation. You train your brain to know what relaxation feels like and to be aware of what tension feels like and what the direction of relaxation actually is. So do you see the power of that?
Yes.
And then so with that awareness, and then there's breathing exercises which are really, again, helping to breathing exercises, especially in yoga traditions where I learned them from, because I've done yoga teacher training and meditation teacher training and have been on a spiritual path with yoga techniques for over 20 years now, where I learned a lot of these things, but they're very universal. And it's very well known in yoga practice that the breath is very closely tied with our state of consciousness, and whether we're breathing quickly and agitatedly, you can induce agitation in your mind with that. If you breathe calmly and deeply, especially in the diaphragm, you can induce calmness. So there's a real cause-effect relationship there, and the few breathing exercises help you experience that. So you have the tense and relax that helps you know what relaxation feels like. You have simple breathing exercises to use in Stop, Breathe, Reflect, Choose to accept that greater reality and induce calmness in yourself within a breath or two. And this is something that soldiers and police officers and people that are in a lot of tense situations learn how to do exactly these same exercises because they work. And then the third exercise is a very simple meditation practice. And meditation isn't anything strange or Eastern or, something mystical. It's really about inducing the relaxation response and increasing your self-awareness. And it's just by observing the meditation exercise in here is just one of watching your breath passively without trying to control the breath. And it's a simple mindfulness exercise that gives you that greater self-awareness, induces the relaxation response in the body. And then as you're increasing that awareness, when you meet potential stressors outside of those practices, you can be aware of, oh, I'm feeling tension, right? And that's the moment that you choose to stop because you're aware of it before you've reacted. And then you say, I'm going to react with relaxation. I'm going to just do a quick deep breath and get that calmness back in my body. And now I'm in a state where I can reflect and choose.
Yeah, that's perfect.
And as you start practicing that in little ways, and I make it clear in the book that there's going to be stressors that they're going to overwhelm you. And there's going to be a lot of little ones, though, that you can control yourself in. A great place to do this is just like if you're reading a newspaper or watching news or listening to the radio, and you're normally used to screaming at the radio or the newspaper or whatever, the newspaper cannot hear you. The radio cannot hear you. The TV cannot hear you. So what are you yelling at exactly? That's a good place to say, hey, look, that's just venting. But that's a good place where the consequences of changing my reaction are negligible because, on the downside, because I'm not trying to control anybody, there's nothing to control. So let me try practicing this different way of responding in those moments. Those are the simple little things that you can do. Or like, when you drop a quarter out of your pocket or you drop your keys or, those things can become stressors to people, right? Yeah. Just little agitations and little irritations. But those are small, and so you can practice on those, and then gradually as you start to master those levels of stressors, you start practicing on bigger ones. And that's what I mean by increasing your resilience and your stress threshold. That over time, as you do this, the amount of energy or the intensity of a stressor that comes into your life that will actually push you over the edge is getting very high, to the point where you may not experience real stress, which is that physiological response, more than like maybe once a year every 9 months or something like that, which is a very different way to live than experiencing it every 20 minutes, right?
Or yeah, at least that often.
Because physiologically, it takes 3 hours for the stress hormones to flush out of your body. And if you re-stress your body within that 3-hour time frame, you're building chronic stress with all of the health problems that come from that, and just living life miserably in that sense. So if you can get that threshold out and start giving your body more and more space between real stressful events, then your body starts to heal and your body can start taking care of itself, and life becomes much more joyful.
Now, there's so much more in the book. This was a cool part of it. So one of the things I'm going to be doing for myself, and Kraig has been nice enough to allow me to share this with you, is in the book, he's showing you how to do each of these daily exercises. What I'm going to do for myself, because I don't want to be flipping through the book each and every time I do this, I'm going to build a checklist for myself of each of the exercises in turn. So I can literally just go through my checklist and know that I've done each of them in turn. And Kraig's nice enough to allow me to share that with you. So one of the things I want to do here is, if you'll go to the Facebook group, that's 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/group, that'll take you to the Facebook group. If you're not already a member, go ahead and join the group. And if you'll post a picture of yourself with the book in hand, I will send you that checklist so you don't have to keep flipping through the book each time you want to do the exercises. So go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/group, post a picture of yourself with Kraig's book, Solving Stress, and I'll send you the checklist.
It'd be fun to see all everybody's pictures on that. Yeah,
absolutely. And so, and there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of other things in the book. You need to read about his Donald Duck, Daffy Duck poster and a lot of other stuff that's in there. That's just,
that's the chapter about like choosing your influences, that once you start to experience that calmness in yourself, you want to start surrounding yourself with a better environment. And you can control a lot of aspects of your environment. Yeah. All that escape stuff that you bring in, what kind of movies do you watch? What kind of music do you listen to? What stuff do you put around in your home, in your office? Is it agitating or is it calming? Yeah. But you have that choice.
And so, Kraig, if someone wanted to reach out to you, learn more about the book, or get the book, where would you like for me to send them?
So the book is certainly available on Amazon.com, and I appreciate people putting reviews there as well, because that very much helps. The publisher, crystalclarity.com, as a publishing house that has worked with the book here, and I have another book through them. It's actually called the Harmonium Handbook through them, which talks about this little pump reed organ that's made in India these days. It used to be a Western instrument, and I used to import them, and I ended up writing a user manual for it. And, I do write technical documentation for a living, so
But honestly, this book does not read like technical documentation. So you do have multiple skills there. You're not writing a technical manual.
That's right. I'm really writing a how-to guide and a self-help book here, but bringing that ability to understand a lot of the details and the information that's out there, distilling it down into really the essence of what you need to know in working with stress. What's the reality of stress? What does it do to you? What are its true origins? And then what is the simplest, most effective way to get out of it? And that's what I've really tried to distill. This book is only 150 pages long. It's not some large tome that you have to try to memorize. And like you said, the exercises can be reduced down to a simple checklist that once you've practiced them for a week or two, you're going to have them memorized. Yeah. And you're going to be able to do them anywhere you want, at any time you want. And you can then toss the book aside. But except I think the last two chapters, which really talk about choosing your influences and your environment, and then the last chapter called Living on Purpose, which is about redirecting your life's energies in ways that are productive and joyful, and taking that inner transformation once you've found that solution to stress, and then rebuilding your life from a new foundation. So there's a lot of fun guidance in there that also follows up. There's another book I've written that I've just self-published called Finding Focus, that is published on lulu.com. That's the one place you can get it right now, that goes much more deeply into that whole subject. But people can go to my website, kraigbrockschmidt.com. I occasionally blog there about different things. I'll probably do more about the book in the coming months as we work on promotion for it. I have some information about the other books, including the technical tomes that I've written. And I have even things like, I do a lot of singing in my spare time. I have some recordings of performances that I've given and some other just interesting stuff there. A lot of other fun articles that I've written on different topics that I'll try to help give a different perspective on certain common questions, or, I'm always looking for that's kind of special way through a topic that's not about taking one side or the other, or saying, stress is good, stress is bad, or you have to manage stress. But what's something right through this fine space in the middle that opens up very many new possibilities of insight. So I have some neat stuff written on there that I've really enjoyed sharing with people.
Cool. So we will have the show notes, and the show notes will have all of these links. You can go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/294, and you can find all those links in the show notes. So Kraig, thank you so much for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
It's been my pleasure, and being over 40 myself and finding, more fitness and more need for fitness. I really appreciate you having me and sharing this with your audience and all the service work that you're doing to help all of us over 40 be more lively and productive.
Thank you. If you enjoyed today's episode, would you please take the time to go to 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/review and leave us a rating and review. Thank you. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, I'm going to start a series I call the Wellness Roadmap. You can find it here tomorrow at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com. Until then, have a happy and healthy day.